Christmas, bloody Christmas. A time which should be quiet and wholesome, but is also depressing and outright brutal for some. Especially in darker stories, Christmas is a great juxtaposition for showing the heartwarming time in a bleaker way. The bright colors of Christmas lights suddenly don't create joy, but veil rooms in sinister dim light, a room in which evil could lurk in the dark corners. Beautiful snow being splashed with blood creates a contrast that seems artful and dreadful both at the same time. A family come together can be a cause for celebration, can also be awkward or outright deadly. Things could be so great but often are not. Just like in this movie. Sarah should be happy. She is expecting her first child, the due date is around Christmas, but she is anything but happy. Her boyfriend died in a car crash earlier that year and she was also involved in the accident. Anything left from her love is the baby and the scars from the day she lost him, which are still visible on her face. Her boss is annoying, riots are happening once again in Paris, and the routine check in the hospital is awkward thanks to an odd nurse. Once she is at home, she waits for her mother to visit, but she is plagued by hallucinations of her boyfriend and disturbing visions of her baby. But things get worse when she suddenly spots a woman outside her house, watching, smoking, saying nothing, just standing there in the darkness. Once Sarah sees her, she makes a picture of the woman. As Sarah is a photographer, she has the equipment ready, but the woman doesn't flinch, even when the light of the camera is flashing. Sarah calls the police, but once they arrive, no one can be found. The woman seems to have disappeared, but the cops promise to send someone later again. Sarah is unsettled, but the recent events still take their toll on her and she goes exhausted to bed. Once she is sleeping, the woman enters the house. She finds a scissor and is entering the bedroom. She cuts into Sarah's belly button, but fortunately she wakes up, pushes the woman aside, and hides in the bathroom. Sarah realizes that the woman wants what is inside Sarah. She wants her child, and the psychotic woman has just started. Inside is a film of the new French Extremity and probably the most brutal one at that. Sarah's fight for survival is unrelenting and bloody. Almost the whole movie takes place in the house and mostly in the bathroom, which bright white tile walls will be splattered in blood. Sarah is in a big disadvantage due to her pregnancy, but she still manages to fight back much more effectively than the other people entering the house and encountering the woman. The woman has also almost supernatural strength, it seems, being able to stab people through the head with the scissors, surviving heavy attacks, and just murdering ruthlessly a bunch of people in the house, which turns into a slaughterhouse quickly. There are cut throats, stabbed heads, eyes being stabbed, heads being shot off, and much more. We immediately see that this is not an ordinary slasher film, and there's no restraint in its brutality, and no one is safe. The woman is even being able to fight off some corpses. Granted, they are not the sharpest tools in the shed, but it's still insane how she manages to kill them off, and the already violent film kicks into another gear once the cops arrive, becoming basically an absolutely hellish nightmare, including one cop being brain damaged and turning into a violent berserker, attacking everything and everyone nearby while still being handcuffed to a dead prisoner. The woman also shows a degree of sadism that would impress even Art the Clown. The hellish display of violence is the biggest draw for the movie, which also would turn off a lot of people. But unfortunately, other than that, it doesn't have a lot to offer, I would say. While the movie is obviously inspired by the films of Dario Argento and other Italian filmmakers, and also Clive Barker among others, regarding its style, it's also just pretty cheap, which is a bit odd as the film cost like 2.5 million euro it seems and is mostly shot in a house. So I'm not quite sure where the money went. Sure, there is a lot of splatter effects, and with Béatrice Dalle, we also have one famous actress. Well, maybe Alison Paradis is also expensive, but I kind of doubt that they took a huge chunk of the budget for their paycheck. The cheap look really hurts the film at times. Of course, the CGI is also not that good. While shots of the baby in the womb look okay, even though it's a bit weird to show it to display Sarah's state of stress at times, and maybe a little bit unnecessary, other effects are just outright terrible. There is a shot of someone being burned with a lighter and can of spray, which looks just terrible. But fortunately a lot of the effects are practical. While also not fantastic, they are on a pretty good level of quality for a horror B-movie splatter film, I would say. Another big negative for the movie is the plot and the characters though. The plot is paper thin. After a few minutes to establish the accident and Sarah's pregnancy, as well as her boss, almost all of the story is just Sarah in the house fighting for her life and people coming in to get slaughtered by the woman. And to be honest, some of the establishing scenes early on feel quite pointless. We also never learn that much about anyone. We don't know who Sarah actually is, the boss is just glanced over and Sarah's mother is also barely in the movie. The cops are pretty stupid and make some outright terrible decisions as well. For a movie that kind of tries to have an artsy feel and create an otherworldly kind of story that you can take at face value as something that is realistic or real, it kind of falls into some of the well-known cliches of other slasher movies. Also, compared to the other new French Extremity movies that are more well-known, it lacks the suspense of high tension, the social commentary of frontiers, or the psychological depth and horror commentary on the rich and effects of trauma and mental illness of martyrs. While Inside leaves some room for interpretation, it most of all feels like two guys making just the most fucked up film they could. Something that is insanely violent, and I mean mission accomplished. The style would be nice if they had the budget to really pull it off, but even with that there are some striking images, and Julien Maury and Alexandre Bustillo went on to create other stylish splatter films with varying degrees of critical and audience success. Livid was in my opinion quite terrible. Among the Living was a lot better, but also nothing great, even though both of them also don't have the most compelling writing. The interpretation of Leatherface wasn't that bad in my opinion, but nothing to write home about, and I have not seen anything after that which they made. They got better on pulling off their visual style, I would say though, with the later movies. If you are into violent splatter films, which are breaking taboos and don't have the most complex story, Inside might be worth a watch. Its style and brutality push it over mediocrity, and the last 30 minutes or so are so insanely violent that it will stay in your memory for a while. But be warned, this is not for the faint of heart. But people who watched the Terrifier movies, or might even think that they are a bit too tame, can probably have their fun with this one. A movie that is definitely not for all, but people who want to push the boundaries in regards to on-screen violence will like this one, I would say. And Inside gets a 7 out of 10, even though it's closer to a 6 than an 8.